So I've just remembered that I wanted to record something. And since I do actually have quite some time left, I'm also gonna do so. It is funny though. I mean, I've been trying out some three-dimensional things and renders and whatnot in Blender. Been trying to really, learn it. And yeah, it's actually quite fun, even though the end product was really not as I imagined it to be. So, it's definitely an art to being able to render something and create something in 3D that's actually, looking amazing and actually pretty good and pretty great. But yeah, anyway, this is not the topic of the video and or the audio and or whatever, the podcast, but we're going to go through something else. Nope, Jordan Peterson ain't no Stoic, by the howtobeastoic.wordpress.com site, which, it's actually a very interesting thing that a site is so popular, even though it's not even having a paid domain. It's just some free domain thing. And well, anyway, very interesting, but very cool. And also interesting title of this article. And we're going to read the article. I don't necessarily think that I'm going to go through the whole one since it's actually really, really long, but we're going to see. People have been asking my opinion from a Stoic perspective about Jordan Peterson for a while now, and the time has finally come. The impetus derives from a recent article by Justin Vakula, published at the Modern Stoicism blog, which takes a cautionary positive approach to Peterson and draws parallels between his views and our philosophy. See here for response by Kai Whiting and Leonidas Konstantakos. Much wilder than the one you're about to read. In this post, I wish to push back against Vakula's interpretation, explain why I think Jordan Peterson is not a good point of reference for Stoic practitioners, and more generally, ponder what does it mean for X, where X is a person, a fictional character, or a position, to quote-unquote be Stoic. First, though, a few preemptive caveats. Peterson, to my and Valko's knowledge, does not claim to be a Stoic, nor does he acknowledge any influence of Stoicism on his writings. So this is rather an exercise in whether, to what extent, his ideas are Stoic in the broad sense of the term. Also, several people, including Vakula, keep repeating that it is unstoic to criticize and even more to insult other people. They get that from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, where he repeatedly reminds himself to keep calm when dealing with annoying others and to look first at his own shortcomings. This is certainly good advice, but it seems like we forget that we Stoics were very vocal in their criticism of other people's philosophies. The Epicureans, the Aristotelians, the academic skeptics, as well as political positions. Heck, Cato the Younger started a war to oppose Julius Caesar. Not to mention that Epictetus often refers to his students as fools. What distinguishes Stoic criticism is not its alleged gentleness, but the fact that it is supposed to be done virtuously. That is in the pursuit of truth or justice or both, and by deploying good arguments and whatever empirical evidence happens to be germane to the issue at hand. Well, also on the other hand, can you assume that somebody else is Stoic so that when I'm insulting somebody, I know this person is not gonna be hurt because he or she thinks about this thing in a Stoic manner, if you know what I mean. Anyway. Okay, now back to Vakula's portrayal of Peterson and his alleged Stoic leanings. Peterson is Peterson is important because he is influential. As Vakula and a recent New York Times article points out, his YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers. His 12 books is an Amazon bestseller, and countless young people feel inspired by him. And so do I, to some degree, even though it is incredibly important to not, forget to think about things and still kind of evaluate whether whatever he's saying is the truth or makes sense or not. So he is a cultural force to be reckoned with, and that is why we are doing the reckoning. The question at hand is not whether there are some similarities between what Peterson writes and what the Stoics teach. Such similarities are undoubtedly there. Then again, pick yourself up and do the right thing, or endure what life throws at you, quote unquote, are not exclusively Stoic concepts. They are found pretty much everywhere in one form or another, from Christianity to Judaism, from Buddhism to Confucianism. And yet, I'm not aware of anyone making the argument that Peterson is a Stoic, Christian, Judeo-Buddhist Confucian. The issue, rather, is whether there are sufficient deep similarities between Peterson and Stoicism. I will argue that not only the answer is no, but that the sort of worldview Peterson advances is, in fact, anti- or anti-Stoic. I think it's not anti, isn't it? Anti. Well, anyway. The first bit of Peterson's advice we encounter in Vakula's post is clean your room and get your life in order, which is good advice, the sort that my mom used to give me, but that didn't make her a Stoic. The crucial part of the Stoic advice is that it tells us how to get our life in order by practicing the 4 cardinal virtues of prudence, courage, justice, and temperance. And it explains to us why we ought to do it, because virtue is the only thing that is always good. It can't be used for bad by definition, as argued by Socrates in the Euthydemus or something. Anyway, Peterson, by contrast, gets this imperative from his adoption of Carl Jung's views about the perennial opposition between logos and eros, where logos represents order and it is masculine, while eros represents chaos and it is feminine. From which Peterson further derives that it is both good and natural for man to control women. Order has to overcome chaos. So why is it natural? Because Peterson buys wholesale the most crude version of evolutionary psychology, according to which gender roles have been pretty much fixed since the Peterson or whatever. From this perspective, according to Peterson, the apogee of American cultural life was back in the 50s, and we ought to get back to that place. Well, I don't know. It really sounds Jordan Peterish, if you know what I mean. That, I don't want to say women are bad and whatnot, but very strong opinion on women, let's put it like that. But all the above, so far as I can tell, is a lot of pseudo-scientific and pseudo-philosophical nonsense. Jung pretty much invented wholesale entirely unempirical concepts like archetypes, espoused certifiably pseudo-scientific notions like that of synchronicity, and liberally borrowed from mythology and Eastern mysticism. He compared the logos-eros dichotomy to the yin-yang one. There is not a shred of evidence to think that any of this is a decent description of the actual human condition, and particularly of the differences between men and women, not to mention that there is no mention of other genders, which Peterson, again, pseudo-scientifically simply denies out of existence. Well, I don't want to give you my opinion on that. Anyway. As for evolutionary psychology, it is a rather controversial discipline about which I have written in depth as an evolutionary biologist, in both making sense of evolution and nonsense on stilts. Suffice to say here that while some evo-psych research is certainly well done and interesting, the field is highly speculative at best when it comes to the evolution of gender roles. And as any Philosophy 101 course will teach you, even if gender roles evolved by natural selection that tells us zero of interest about how we ought, ethically, to reconsider them in contemporary society. As the evolutionary psychologist Steven Pinker once put it, he chose a life without children in order to dedicate himself to his writing and his friends. And if his genes don't like it, they can go jump into the lake. As Vakula acknowledges, Peterson puts a lot of emphasis on how to climb social hierarchies, which he regards as natural and inevitable. The second characteristic obviously does not follow from the first one. Yeah, it really does. And by the way, I also think that it is natural. I believe in a human being a social creature, animal, anyway. He thinks that women ought to be dominated by men, and he maintains that white privilege is a myth. This is one of the most unstoic aspects of his thinking. The Stoics were among the first cosmopolitans, thinking that women ought to be educated in philosophy because they are just as capable as men, that all humans are equal, and that our duty is to cooperate, not compete. With fellow human beings, they imagine an ideal society in Sena's republic that is very far from the capitalism that Peterson prefers. Indeed, it looks like an anarchic utopia where wise men and women live in harmony because they finally understood how to use reason for the betterment of humankind. Vakula, in his positive take on the Peterson Stoicism connection, did not comment at all on political and social evolvement, probably because Peterson does not come out particularly well in that department, and he certainly doesn't come out as a Stoic. So here he is from 12 Rules. There is a quote, and I'm also going to end the episode with this quote. Have you cleaned up your life? If the answer is no, here's something to try. Start to stop doing what you know to be wrong. Start stopping today. Don't blame capitalism, the radical left, or the iniquity of your enemies. Don't reorganize the state until you have ordered your own experience. Have some humility. If you cannot bring peace to your household, how dare you try to rule a city? Set your home in perfect order before you criticize the world. Well, the next paragraph should also be fine. This sounds deceptively Stoic, but the deception is dangerous. First off, notice that we are told not to go out and make noise about changing the world until our own household is in perfect order. Well, then since it will never be, we are not sages. I guess we are not authorized to invest time and energy into questioning our social status or systems and try to change them for the better. How convenient for someone who clearly benefits from sad social order. And yeah, I think that I'm actually going to go ahead with this article since it's very interesting and also well written. I couldn't give you some, well, how should I say, some ways in which I can validate the arguments. But yeah, anyway, gonna see you the next time. Bye bye. Wish you the best.